Hi again. In Sidelights on Christian Doctrine by James Orr, in his chapter Man and Sin. Man, the image of God. The scripture represents this truth in the narrative of creation, and speaking of man as made in the image of God. That is the great fundamental affirmation of the Bible about man, as determinative of his nature, his position in God's world, and relation to God himself. In Genesis 1, this declaration is introduced in a very remarkable way. The language used prepares us for something new and exceptional. The chapter has been speaking of God's successive acts of creation. Then comes a pause, and you have God, Elohim, taking counsel with himself. God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the cattle," etc. Verse 26. It is not a case of converse with inferior beings as with angels. That notion has been mooted. But you have to notice that there is nothing said about angels in this first chapter of Genesis. The whole doctrine of angels is undeveloped in this early period. You'll seldom read of angels except in the case of the angel of the Lord, who was not a created angel. It is not angels, it is God himself who is here conversing with himself about his own divine deeds. And that is an aspect of the matter on which, as formerly observed, you do not get light fully thrown till you come to the New Testament doctrine of the Trinity. God then is here taking counsel with himself, and in the succeeding verse you have the declaration that this counsel is carried out. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Verse 27. This then is the grandest, deepest, most fundamental utterance in all the Bible about man. It underlies the whole doctrine of man, nearly every other doctrine in the Bible. So we have now to ask, what is this image of God in which man was created? What do we mean by it? What does it cover? First, we may be very clear that by the image of God is not to be understood anything relating to man's bodily form. It is not material shape that constitutes man the image of God, for God has no bodily form. This was the very ground on which the Israelites were forbidden to make an image of God, because they saw no similitude. That's Deuteronomy 4, verse 15. God has no form. He is spirit without bodily parts. Then, second, we cannot place this image of God merely in man's dominion over the creatures. This was the old Socinian idea. If there was any poorer interpretation than another to be given of a verse, the old Socinians were sure to get hold of it. So this was their notion of the image of God. The sovereignty of man over the creatures is indeed included in the image. Man is an image of God in the dominion he exercises. But this is not the primary sense of the expression. It is because man possesses the rational and moral attributes in which he spiritually resembles God, that he is capable of exercising his sovereignty. This leads us to the third point, to the position that the image of God in man is to be sought not in something outward, but in something inward. Not in something relative, but in something essential to man's being. In something stamped primarily upon the soul or spiritual nature of man. And this we see when we look into it to be the truth. The image of God is that in which, in distinction from the creatures below him, man resembles God, in which he is like God. No distinction is to be made between the terms image and likeness, as is seen by the fact that in verse 27, image covers both. But that resemblance can only be found in what man is as spirit. Man is the image of God in the world because he is a spiritual being, an intelligent and moral being, a self-conscious, personal being. He has rationality. He has a moral nature. He has moral knowledge, moral affections, moral will. In this respect, as rational and moral personality, he is, in the very essence and conception of his being, the image of his Creator, of the personal God, of the all-wise, all-knowing God, of the holy God. If this be the true view to take of man's nature, then we see that man in this world stands alone as bearing the image of God. No, someone will perhaps say, look at the animals. They also have intelligence. And no doubt, when we do look at the animals, we find that they do possess something which we can properly describe as intelligence. All the same, I think it can be very clearly shown that the difference between man and even the highest of the animals is not a mere difference of degree, but a difference of kind. Next, did God, the image of God in man, was it erased with the coming of sin? And what does this view of God, that we are made in God's image, what does it involve evolution in any way? Because there are those in the Christian community who would say that if we do have a resemblance to God, it must have evolved. Mind must have evolved. Even our spirit must have evolved. Well, does the Bible make room for those ideas? Next time.